Clearly, in 15 minutes, I can't teach you how to write a position statement, but I've got some handouts and some information that you can take back with you that will help you through that process. I want to share with you something that was in the Forestry Source a number of years ago. It was written by Bill Rockwell, and he said, "Some of my oldest memories are of a wolfy old white oak standing in my backyard sandbox, the paper birch in the garden, and twin American elms out by the sidewalk, of eyeballing tree heights to the first climbable limb, and of adventuring 2 lots away where the pavement ended and the woods began. In the endless woods behind our next home, we repelled many imaginary invaders and had real acorn fights. In the swamp we caught frogs, played hockey, ate sapsicles, and discovered a stream in a hidden valley. Where the swamp became a lake, we swam and caught bluegills. As I grew, tree types got more names. Some woods split easily, and annual rains tracked the passage of time. I learned to ignore mosquito bites, and that "This is my father's world" became my favorite hymn. I hunted rabbits out the back door, stalked wild asparagus, and took long walks on snowy nights with and then after a girlfriend. Through books, stories, and travel, my wonder of forests spread up north and across the country. The shortest way to school in winter was over the lake, through the woods, but once there, suntans faded as we pondered careers without frogs. Then we discovered forestry. After science classes had dimmed the wonder of forests, forestry classes widened it, and becoming a forester promised a wonder-filled devotion to the greatest good for the greatest number in the long run. Later, when the church's long-term planning committee looked out 5 years, I laughed. Often over a beer, rarely in formal meetings, foresters tell stories like these, reinforcing a sense of uniqueness so strong we forget that our experiences differ from others only by degrees. Anxious to be understood, we stress science while ignoring our more common forest passions. We hide behind the science, I believe. Think about the last time you talked to a landowner or you talked to somebody about forests. It's easy to fall into basal area per acre, logs per stem, you know, all those kind of science numbers that we just love and enjoy. We encourage rationality about forests, forgetting that people don't care what we know until they know that we care. We want forestry to be known as a profession, not just out of pride, but so we can be trusted to do our jobs better. However, we sometimes forget parts of the profession, embracing the science, art, and practice of creating, managing, using, and conserving forests and associated resources for human benefit in a sustainable manner to meet desired goals, needs, and values. I don't trust medical technique nearly as much as I trust people who take time to know me and my values about medical care. Similarly, I don't ask my lawyer to keep me from all harm at all cost. I ask for help balancing competing risks according to my perceptions of competing values. In the same way, we individually and collectively must connect better with landowners, private and public, in terms of their perceptions and values before we can even guess at what knowledge to bring to the kitchen table. For most people, our credibility depends more on our stories than our science. Stories tell more than science ever can, and we know by means that transcend our science. Science must be a tool, not a weapon, and we must be accessible to others, and even vulnerable to be truly known. As a kid, I knew rounded oak leaves were distinct from pointed ones, but wondered why I could not see the clear distinctions among the pointed ones as in the books. Turns out I was right. Black and red oaks hybridize, and many trees have blocky, smooth bark, not bark just blocky or smooth. Sharing this with the landowner makes me more human. And forestry, less cut and dried, and once again, it's wonderful. If you think about how we can advocate for our profession, we can get caught up in the science. We don't do a very good job telling our stories. We continually talk about being introverts. You know the old joke about how do you tell the extrovert in a room full of foresters? It's the person looking at somebody else's boots. Yeah. Takes a minute, but it finally clicks. I believe we're not really the introverts that we think we are. I believe everybody in this room went into the profession we went into for exactly the same reason. And I believe that we did that because of our love of the forest. When's the last time a forester told you how much they love the woods and that's why they got into the profession? We don't talk about that. And I think because of that, we've lost our voice with the public. So just an aside, for whatever that's worth. What I did for you on policy statements is I printed out some of the screenshots from the SAF national webpage. The first one is who the policy team is. Danielle Watson is on that team. The second one I printed out is the page that talks about advocacy tools, ways that you can advocate for the profession. Second one, or third page is to take action. Oh look, a Pinchot quote, don't you love it? Pinchot said the vast possibilities of our great future will become realities only if we make ourselves responsible for that future. So there's some information on ways that you can take action, ways that you can advocate. Then there's the page on position statements. There are a number of current position statements. Position statements are developed at the request of HSD, at the request of the board, at the request of the members. There's a policy committee that works on those policies. There's a formal process. If you at the local level decide that you want a position statement, a policy statement, you have to go through the process of getting it approved by national and making sure that it doesn't conflict with any of the policy statements or position statements that currently exist. There is a distinct difference between advocating or providing information on a particular piece of legislation, or speaking for forestry, or speaking as an SAF member. That is different, and that is very different than a position statement. The ones that are currently the ones that currently exist: forest management and climate change, roads and managed forest, wildland fire management, herbicide use on forest lands, state policies regarding private forest practices, clear cutting as a silvicultural practice, timber harvesting on public lands, non-native invasive forest species, regulation of genetically modified trees, utilization of woody biomass for energy, federal and state tax treatment of private forest lands, loss of U.S. private forest lands, forest inventory and analysis program. Those are the ones that currently exist. I've noted which ones were recently updated in 2019 and which ones are to be updated next going into 2020. They're all on the webpage. I'd encourage you to look at them. They are good technical documents to provide to legislative staff members. I can tell you from my own experience, most legislators don't give a tinker's damn about what our position statements say. They want to know who you are. They want to know that you care. They want to know that you're a voter in their district, and you can have some impact chatting with those folks. There's the next page is general general advocacy advice, just information, how to speak to people, how to approach them. You know, you need to be informed, you need to be prepared and concise, particularly when you're dealing with members of the legislature and other decision makers that have very limited amount of time. So you need to do your elevator speech, 2 minutes. Be an active and willing listener. Clearly Tom talked about that a bunch. Be a tour guide, offer field trips, offer a walk in the woods. Multiple channels, be persistent, say thank you, et cetera, and then the next 2 pages are advocacy and SAF, number of ground rules, when you can speak for SAF, when you can speak as an SAF member. Those are 2 very different and distinct things. I encourage you to look at all these, use them as a resource, use the resources on the web for the position statements that already exist out there. I'll tell you a quick story about what's been going on in New York. If you haven't heard, our legislature passed and our governor signed a bill called the Climate and Community Protection Act. It's frightening for the profession. It's absolutely frightening. About 3 years ago, the governor put in a bill called Reheat New York, which was put in place to encourage the use of biofuels and wood pellets for heat. We actually built a community heating project at the state office complex in Raybrook that heats the Adirondack Park Agency building, the DEC building, and 2 state police buildings. It looked really positive for the future, for using wood, low-grade wood for energy, particularly to offset fuel oil. As most of you know, the single biggest fuel for heat in New England, New York is number 2 fuel oil. The legislature decided that they were going to institute through this recent bill a carbon tax on any industry that doesn't use renewables. And they defined renewables as wind, solar, geothermal, and wave. They did not consider biofuels or biomass to be renewable. That's scary enough in itself, but what is worse is an industry that's using black liquor for heat, bark for heat, sawdust to run a dry kiln. Not only is not going to be considered renewable, but those industries are going to be charged a carbon tax on that energy use. We have a very active policy committee. We had members of our policy committee who actually testified in front of Senate hearings. They wrote letters to the editors of the local newspapers. They worked diligently on providing information to staffers and members of the legislature. We were not successful in overturning the bill, but the silver lining is that our advocacy and our outreach to those folks have now created an environment where when they have forestry questions, they know that they can call people at New York SAF. They didn't know who we were before this. So, the moral of the story is you don't win all the battles, but you have to be engaged, you have to be involved, you have to step up, you have to write your legislature, you have to talk to your staffers and your local decision makers, and there are a bunch of tools and ways that you can do that. And don't forget